We are taking a break from the Dolphins' 2024 schedule, which was released last night, to dive into the details of Odell Beckham Jr.'s contract with the Dolphins in 2024.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I am your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting. You can find our shows on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Schedule's out tomorrow. I'm giving myself a little bit of time to digest it before we do our way too early 2024 Miami Dolphins schedule prediction. So that's tomorrow's show. You have that to look forward to. And we're taking the break for me to go back to nerdy GM, capologist, contract extraordinaire hat is being put on today. The details and the terms of the Odell Beckham contract. We have it. And not just, okay, what did you do with this year's cash, which is paid? What are the incentives? What is the pathway to the incentives? We got all of that information, and it was kind of like this nice extra spike in Odell Beckham Jr. Content, because Odell Beckham Jr. had his introductory press conference with the South Florida media yesterday. And we did the show. We talked about it a little bit. And the expectations, as long as the expectations are in the right place, that this is going to be an ancillary part of the offense. Odell kind of teased some of it when he talked to the media. He talked about getting on third downs, and Miami saw a lot of double coverage against both Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And that leaves matchups elsewhere that are one-on-one across the board. And if you're in long down and distance on third down, you're probably going to get 11 personnel out on the field. And who is that other player? Now, whether you're lining up inside or outside, being a slot player, being a perimeter player, Odell's predominantly been a perimeter player. Those opportunities, if there is that extra attention, Odell constantly went back to the word opportunity here. And I don't think that means opportunity to play every single play. But if you got 500 snaps out of Odell Beckham, and a lot of them came on third downs when it was 3rd and 6+, and teams want to double your two other guys, and you're leaving a slot safety or potentially a linebacker matching up against Odell Beckham Jr., that is a significant change versus the personnel that Miami ran out when they ran 11 personnel last year. And that's something we're going to get into a little bit as well, getting into the personnel groupings themselves and how they're different and whether they're upgraded or not versus the previous season. I'm looking forward to doing that, but this is kind of a microscopic view of one piece of that puzzle in Odell, and we now have a lot more clarity on how the Dolphins got this deal done and what it looks like, and that's what we're going to get into here today on the show. So salary split and void year. There was one void year. I know void years, some people like void years for the flexibility it affords. Some people don't like void years because you're automatically signing yourselves up for future cap investments in players that are not potentially not under contract with the team. It's no different than void money or dead money, right? It's just you then have the opportunity to make a decision. And if Odell Beckham Jr., for example, reaches all of his incentives, I think there's a pretty good chance they'd re-sign him to a new contract next year. Now, whether or not he prices himself out of Miami's range or not, that's a different conversation altogether. But Odell Beckham gets a 1-year, $3 million contract with the team. $1.79 million of that was a signing bonus, and $1.21 million of that is the week-to-week game checks that he will get throughout the course of the season. That adds up to $3 million. How the Dolphins elected to break that down is the salary you can't negotiate. It's $1.21 million in weekly game checks. There's no flexibility there. You have to account for that against the cap. So they took the $1.79 million signing bonus and they split it in half. And they said, we're going to put one void year on the back end. So we're going to take $895,000 of it this year, plus the $1.21 million in base salary, for a $2.1 million cap hit this year. And then next year's void year is the other half of his $1.79 million signing bonus, $895,000 in what is right now automatically dead money because it's a void year for Odell, plus whatever incentive money he achieves. And the Dolphins had a two-pronged approach with the incentives that allows them to kind of automatically bake it in and say, hey, whatever extra cash Odell earns is going to be applied to the 2025 salary cap as compared to the 2024 salary cap because it has been designated as not likely to be earned. And one of the tricks of the trade here, and I believe this was Chris Kaufman of 3 yards per carry, made this point first on social media. The designation of likely to be earned and not likely to be earned incentive money is the difference of having to bake it into your cap allocation for a player in the first year or not. But if you have a two-pronged approach where there's a team incentive and then on top of that, like a performance threshold that you have to clear, because it's team and player threshold, it automatically gets designated as not likely to be earned. And then that way you can automatically defer it to the following year's salary cap. So there's all these kinds of different strategies that are at play. But again, this is why I really like this stuff, because there's a very simple decision to sign Odell to a 1 year, $3 million contract with incentives. There's strategy in doing that and achieving that in this timeline as compared to having to wait until post June 1st when all the money, like they accomplished this based on the structure of the contract. And when you understand what the decision-making process is that goes into getting a contract like this done, you come to appreciate how the Dolphins are playing the game within the game as far as negotiations. So the pathways to incentives is what we're going to touch on next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins, touching on Odell Beckham and his contract details. Make sure you stick with us. The schedule is out, and going to all of your desired Miami Dolphins games, whether they're home or away, it's not supposed to be stressful, so make sure that it's not, and use Gametime to get your tickets for all of the local sporting events, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it that you want to go to. Gametime has you covered with up to last-minute seats with last-minute deals. You can save up to 60% buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more with flash deals and zone deals. You get all-in pricing, so there's no surprises when you put the tickets into your cart and go to checkout. And with just a few taps, you can get those tickets delivered directly to your phone. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That is Locked On NFL as the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Create an account and redeem that code Locked On NFL. Download the Gametime app today for last minute tickets with the lowest prices, guaranteed. Miami put 3 separate performance escalators and a team stipulation into this contract. And this came courtesy, I believe, Albert Breer had it first of Monday Morning Quarterback. The Dolphins, in order for Odell's performance escalators to trigger the cash incentives, the team must finish 20th or better in total offense. Here's the good news for Odell Beckham Jr. The Dolphins under Mike McDaniel have been a top 10 offense in both of his first 2 seasons. So there's very little reason to believe that a very easily achievable team threshold of performance will not be met. The Dolphins the past 2 seasons, 11th and 2nd in points and 6th and 1st in yards. And they put the stipulation out, we got to be 20th or better. And again, that's how you maybe give incentives that you know are likelier to be achieved, but don't have to classify it as not likely to be achieved. That's, again, the game within the game and how you work the guidelines strategically to make good decisions and good strategic decisions to maximize your opportunity in 2024. So 20th or better in total offense. Should not be an issue. That's half the bar that Miami's cleared in each of the last 2 seasons. And in some cases, even lower than that as far as the thresholds. There's receiving yards, receptions, and touchdowns, incentives to be met. There are $2.2 million in total cash available with the incentives in receiving yards. There's $2.2 million in total cash available for incentives in receptions, and there's $850,000 in incentives in touchdowns. They're tiered. For example, receiving yards. You get 566 receiving yards, Odell Beckham, in 2024, which is one more yard than you had last year. You get $400,000 cash bonus for 566 plus. If you surpass 650 receiving yards, you get an additional $800,000 in cash. So that would be $1.2 million in cash for over 650 receiving yards. And if you go over 800 receiving yards, you get another $1 million in cash. So that is your pathway from a receiving yards perspective to the $2.2 million in incentives that's available. Surpass last year's total, boom, 400,000. Over 650, boom, another 800,000. Over 800, boom, you get another $1 million. That same cash distribution is available for Odell in the way of receptions. If you get 36 receptions, which is, again, one more than you had last year, boom, you get $400,000. If you surpass 45 receptions, which is one more than what you achieved your last full season in the NFL, which is in 2021, boom, you get another $800,000. And if you go over 55 receptions, you get another $1 million. So 55 plus receptions for 800 plus receiving yards is a total of $4.4 million in total achieved incentives because they are tiered. Once you pass a certain threshold, you get that cash amount and it stacks. It's not double or it's a flat fixed rate for once you clear the threshold, you get a new cash amount. And in touchdowns, there's only 2 tiers to this one, 4 and 6. And that is, again, 4 is the number of receiving touchdowns that is one more than Odell Beckham Jr. had last year. If he gets 4, he gets $400,000. If he gets 6, he gets another $450,000 for that grand total of 850. And surprise, surprise, he scored 5 touchdowns in 2021, the last time he played a full season. So this structure has been very much set up against the last 3 years, 2021, 2022, in which he missed, and 2023, in which he played in Baltimore. Your performance versus that standard. And I think that's important context because some people have heard and continue to hear the Dolphins signed Odell Beckham and say, oh, well, he's 32 years old. He's not the player he was in New York. No, duh. I did think it was particularly interesting that Odell Beckham referenced during his introductory press conference the parallels between what Miami is doing offensively and what the early Giants did from a timing offense perspective. And that being something that was attractive to Odell, even though he's used to being used and implemented in different ways, that parallel he felt existing and where he's at in his personal career and who he would be playing with is where he went back to that word again, opportunity, and feeling that opportunity in Miami was a really good one for him. So we are going to touch base again on the recent history of Odell Beckham versus what these performance thresholds are for him. Talk about maybe some predictions on where I think he will ultimately fall based on where he is in the pecking order for the Dolphins offense for targets and touches. And that's next on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. It's playoff time, and that means it is winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We teased this a little bit, but Odell Beckham Jr. last year with Baltimore, he played a grand total of 465 snaps in 14 games for the Ravens. Keep that number in mind, 465, because I think that's right around where I would expect Odell's opportunities to fall with Miami from a snap perspective, provided everybody stays healthy. Across those 465 snaps, he got 64 targets for 35 receptions, 565 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The 16.1 yards per reception was the highest single season total for him in his career. Now, there were much more efficient seasons from a catch percentage on targets. He only caught 54% of his targets this past season. That number used to be as high as 70% his rookie season, going all the way back to 2014, which he played in 12 games and had 1,300 yards. Just astronomical numbers early on for him in his career. But even at the tail end of his time that he had with the Giants in 2018 and his first season with the Browns in 2019, his catch percentage was around 60%, so around 55% this past season. That efficiency has certainly gone down. So maybe for Odell, who is a very good route runner and can still move, and he talked about getting back on the track and being able to move and fly around. I think that timing efficiency for a route runner like Odell, maybe you can see that efficiency in target to catch ratio go up, even if you don't necessarily see a huge spike in the targets themselves, because in 465 snaps, he was targeted 64 times throughout the course of the season. For 2.5 receptions per game was the average for Odell Beckham. Now, you go back to 2022, he, of course, did not play. 2021 was split between the Browns and the Rams. And in that season, he played a total of 666 snaps and was targeted 82 times. So the last 2 seasons that he played, you're talking about 72 targets, 74 targets per season across what's an average of like 525 snaps. I think that's the right ballpark. Now, if you're Odell and you get into a more efficient passing offense and you average, let's call it 72, and your catch percentage goes back up to say 62%, now you're talking 45 receptions. That's right on the threshold of the second of the 3 performance tiers. I think Odell doesn't really maximize his cash-in opportunity here with 55 receptions and 800 yards unless somebody else gets hurt and misses significant time. You certainly hope that's not the case. And by no means it's because we don't want to pay Odell Beckham Jr. the money, right? It's because this Dolphins offense will be the best version of itself with the guys that are at the top of the pecking order from a targets perspective, being available and playing the entire season. But just like the addition of Jalen Wright to the running back room, we've focused on workload and work share and target share for Tyreek Hill to a great degree in each of the last 2 seasons because the Dolphins have fed him the football at an unprecedented rate. Can Odell take 10% of the workload off of each one of those 2 guys in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Watt? If he does, maybe that's where I think you could see him push for the max incentives across the board. But I think some of that is probably game plan specific. Some of that is probably a game situation specific. I kind of expect him to thread the needle in this thing right down the middle. So if I had to guess, he would get the 45 receptions, but not the 55 receptions. So he would get $1.2 million in incentives for receptions with my kind of predictive based off of what we know to the best of our ability with the opportunities that I expect him to have. I think he'll hit 650 yards. So I think that's another 1.2. So I think you're talking $2.4 million there. And I don't know, 6 touchdown receptions feels like a lot. I'll say he gets about half of his incentive dollars. And you would obviously take that 1.2 plus 1.2 is 2.4 plus 400,000 is 2.8. I can do that math. Plus the $900,000 that is against the books already because of how they handled his signing bonus to make sure he could fit under the cap comfortably in the here and now to sign this contract. And I'd say you're going to probably carry, if you don't bring Odell Beckham Jr. back, you're going to carry a dead money hit of about $3.8 million next year if he meets what my expectations are for the performance and opportunities for Odell Beckham Jr. Now that we know the details and how that money can be achieved. And it's not a small amount of money. It's very easily digestible when you look at some of the dead cap figures that exist across the league. I look no further than Odell Beckham Jr. and the contract that he signed with the Ravens, right? Odell Beckham Jr. is on the books this year for what in dead money with the Ravens. It's a significant amount of money. It's $3.97 million in void money this year. And then they have another 8.3 in void money next year because they paid him all the cash up front, like the $15 million contract, and spread it out across 5 void years and then cut him before his contract voided as opposed to in first designation to split it across 2 seasons. Saying that's the game within the game for Baltimore. But man, an $8.3 million void hit for Odell being 2 years removed from playing for your team. That's a dangerous game. And you don't want to do that too many times. That's the worst case scenario for the void years. And thankfully for Miami, with how they have chosen to do void years thus far, they don't have the closest contract that they have to that is the one that they have with Shaq Barrett because they signed him to a 1-year deal worth up to $9 million, I believe. And they split that out across, it was 1 year, $7 million plus incentives. He has a per game active bonus of $250,000 that's available to him for dressing in season. Right now, Shaq Barrett would carry a $4.4 million dead cap in 2025. They could theoretically do the same thing that Baltimore did, where they would cut him, designate him as a post-June 1st cut before his contract voids, depending on when that is. You guys following along? Take a $1.1 million dead cap hit in 2025, and then take a $3.3 million dead cap hit in 2026. So you talk about the ways that you could play the game. We just got into the weeds big time, and my apologies for doing that. But I did warn you we were going to put the GM capologist hat on today and really take a swim in it, and that's exactly what we did. So I'm Kyle Krabs. I hope you guys enjoyed this break from the schedule to look at Odell Beckham Jr. and the details of his contract. We will be back again tomorrow for the way too early 2024 schedule prediction show. Looking forward to that, so make sure you keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Fins up.